October meeting.
Mr. Chair, I've read those minutes and find them to be in order and well prepared, so I'll move that we approve.
Have a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
And a second, Commissioner Dodd. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next on our agenda is our investment report. Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, sir. Okay, you know, the Federal Reserve did drop the Fed funds rate another quarter point, which was not unexpected and kind of where we thought, as we've been making decisions, we would be by the end of the year. So I don't know. I guess the prevailing thought is the Fed may hold for a little while now unless economic data says they need to ease more. So we may be a little stable for a while. But I just say that to say we did have a bid, and our best rate was for 1.9 or 190 basis points, and we're today at 228. So even when we drop a quarter point, we're going to be at 2 or a little better. So we just chose not to take that bid. That's what the CDs are offering, but our current rate is still superior to that. So even if we get a little drop, we're making more money where we are. As we have things mature, we kind of keep testing, because there may be a time where locking in makes some sense, but today it's kind of hard to see where we're not better off to stay with where we are. And just off that, just a minute, if you don't mind, sir. We are a month into collecting taxes, and things are going well. Billing's out. We're now collecting the trustee's office for Eagleville and Smyrna, and that's been going very well. That's run very smoothly this year. So.
Yeah, I got several hate letters from you.
Those are Christmas cards. Christmas cards, Commissioner. I want to be the first.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Beatty?
No, sir.
Motion to approve the report.
Mr. Johnson, motion.
Second.
Mr. Stevens. All in favor of the report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Beatty. Next is our fund condition report. Ms. Lacey, handle that for us.
I will. I'll start with the development tax. In October, we received $1,125,000. Brings our total for the year to $2,700,750. There were 81 extended stay units in Murfreesboro. There was 121,500, and 180 apartments in Smyrna generated 270,000. As far as our cash, at the end of October, we had $244,596,000, with $216,315,000 being operating funds, $28,281,000 being borrowed funds. If there's no more questions, we'll kind of touch on revenue, and I'll follow up with Mr. Beatty on his first month of collections. In 2019, in October, for those taxes, he had collected 6.5% in that first month compared to 5.54% last year at this time. On the revenues also, compared to the prior year, the development tax is 9.4% higher than at this point last year. Hotel motel tax is up 4.7%, and sales tax countywide is up 4.76%.
You had a heart attack.
You can have mine.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything outstanding one way or the other? I don't see any smiley faces.
I know.
Well, it's still too early. It's, it's October, but it's really just 3 months of work on a lot of the revenues. Property taxes, first month, it's up. So right now, I'm just gonna not giving yay or nays on these things.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
Guys, you've heard the report. I have a motion.
I have a question. Didn't the internet law pass where they have to start collecting? When does that start? Did it start in July?
Do you know?
Trying to remember if they did or not. I want to say,
What was
I'm
that?
pretty sure it did.
Because we talked about
But-
that at that last conference, about how they're distributing
Yeah,
it, how
they're-
they're going to come up with that.
Yeah, they're slow to get it done because they
Right,
have to set up their own account with the Department of Revenue,
Right.
and they're trying to get those done. And
Yeah, I was just
some of them are
curious
self-reporting already.
I was just curious when you might start seeing that revenue and where it would go. I guess it'll just go in
The
sales tax.
sales tax will come in.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
the benefit is the sort, how much more would be in the county as opposed to the city
Right. Okay. I was just curious.
on the destination.
Since you brought that up, what about point of sales? Of course, the internet would be associated with that, but still, anything delivered, I mean, is that the same legislation that she's talking about, or?
The
any-
internet sales
So it'll go to point
Where
of
it's
sales.
where it's
plus-
delivered.
It's where it's
Wherever
to deliver.
to. Right.
and not
Right.
purchased.
Right.
Okay.
So ship it to your house.
Yes,
Yep.
so ship
Yeah.
it to your house. Yeah. Or, no.
Just leave it there.
Yeah.
I just say, leave it. Motion to approve the report.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Mr. Johnson, thank you. I don't think we need to call roll on this one. All in favor of this motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, risk management. Mr. Ed?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Right on the first page, you should see a graph, and it shows for calendar year, $63,400,173 compared to your expenses at $60,136,583. In the fiscal period, year-to-date, you will see $17,628,694 in revenue compared to expenditures, $25,515,894. If you switch over to your tracker, and one thing I want to point out on your tracker, there's an error, and I want to make sure, because it definitely does not reflect the true numbers. When you look at the calendar year, the total, 63 million in revenue and 60 million in expenses. When you go down and you look at the calendar year difference in revenue and the calendar year difference in expenditures, the calendar year difference in revenue total is, you have 6 million, it should be 1.8 million. And the calendar year difference in expenditures, you have 55 million, it should be 2.9 million. And what happened was a row got deleted out and it started pulling data from the wrong totals. So I'll get you a corrected copy with the correct information there. But as you look at the number, when you go back up to the totals there, you see that there is a difference of $3,263,590. And you look at November and December still to come. When you drop down to the fiscal year comparison, revenue and expenditures, as you know, the Board of Education's premiums are on a 10-month basis, and as you see the difference in October, now their premiums are starting to come in, being based on a 10-month pay instead of 12 months. So we're beginning to narrow that gap on the fiscal year. And as you look at the revenue there, it's $17,628,694 compared to expenditures at $25,515,894. And your revenue less expenditures is negative $7,887,194.81. But that is continuing to narrow as we get the premiums in over the next 9 months. That's the 264. Any questions? All right, I'll move on to the 266. And there's a couple of things on here I want to point out. When you look at your graph, I'll remind you, and Commissioner Allen, you asked for the footnote down at the bottom, so we've got it added in there for you where there's no bills paid in July. And then you see as things started to climb up for that month that wasn't paid, and then we've kind of leveled off in October. What I will say, I want to make note of, you look at October and you look at 2018, and there's a huge spike there. And I want to point out to you, in 2018, the part of that spike, the workers' comp was $158,000. OJI was $24,000. So that's medical claims that came in on a workers' comp claim over 10 years ago. So that's the reason for that big spike in 2018. And I'm just giving it for your information because it's one of the things that really stuck out in my head when I saw it, like, why is there such a big spike? And on the next page, when you look at the tracker, you've got the year-to-date of $141,080.27 compared to the year-to-date last year at $315,911. And again, that big spike, if you look at it, was the workers' comp claim when you're looking at year-to-date compared to last year. Any questions on that report? And if you give me just a minute to talk about the OJI, we've met several times with the Board of Education. People from the Board of Education were trying to make some changes on injuries, incidences. We've had several meetings and trying to close a gap, trying to, instead of things being isolated at one school, look at it all schools and address it. Trey Lee, the assistant engineer in construction, is in on the meetings. And I just want to say they have done a fabulous job in trying to sit down with us, communicate, and be a partner in this. And so I think we're making some really good progress to try to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or if if we can find something before it happens, a hole or sinkhole. Sinkholes pop up from time to time, and if there's kids out running around on the grass, you want to make sure that you've got it barricaded off, you got it filled in. So anyway, we're making good progress with that. On the legal totals, the liability, legal expenses for the fiscal year, you see that for Hudson Reed and McQuarrie, you have $55,633. And the entire total was $90,406. Anything else?
Any questions for Mr. Hill? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve this report.
Mr. Pierce, he has a motion
Second.
and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
If I could just give a quick report on our wellness fair and our enrollment. As many of you know, we did for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time, we opened up the wellness fair to where we allowed people to come in and they would enroll, check their benefits and everything. Just a couple of things. We started at about 2:30. Our last person rolled out probably about 6:45. We had every station full almost the entire time, and we also had a waiting period of about 10, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. So we constantly had somebody coming in. And again, I've told this story. People would come in with so much stress and like, I need help, can you do something? I've tried to do this, I've called an 800 number, I just want to see somebody and talk to them. And then when they walked out, they felt so relieved. They're like, man, I just feel like sometimes when you get done with your taxes, you're just like, man, I feel better that that's over with. You don't like it, but you feel better about it. But
Do you know how many people attended?
we don't. And one of the things we had, instead of it coming through the front door, when we got there to the facility, it was really hot, so they raised the overhead doors, and we had them coming through the front door, but when they raised the overhead doors, then people just came in through the door, so we weren't able to get a tally like we would have funneled them through the front door, but it was so hot in there, we had to get some air in there pretty quick. But I would say it was as much or more than last year. And what I will tell you, there's a couple of things I want to, is that our online health assessment, your incentive points that you pass, it's gone through this committee and other committees, is that the online health assessment was up 549% this year. The biometric screening was up 20% this year. We also brought in a St. Thomas bio screening, for biometric screening. And we were curious because the points cut off at September 31st. And we thought, well, is there a need? Because there's so many people that do it in August and September. And we just wanted to see, is there a need? So we put the bus out there. It was full in 3 days. The appointments were full in 3 days. And again, we were just 3 weeks past when the incentive point. So we looked at it like, and one of the reasons was, so we looked at it, so we need to go out a little bit and make it a little more mobile? So that was one of the things we got good reception on. And the enrollment that we've had for the last 2 weeks, Friday was the last day, the passive enrollment for 2017, the eligible employees, it was 51% 2017. 2018 was 51%. And this past 2 weeks, it's 69% is what we had people. So we had a lot of engagement. We visited every school, we visited every department. This year we went to E911 Community Care. And I want to give a big thanks to the school administrators for letting us in, taking up the appointments and doing all that, and the department heads for letting us in, and doing everything possible to support us, and especially in that 2 weeks, the calls we got from the schools. It was just unbelievable, the amount of help we had. But I also want to point out to the budget committee, because the last budget year, we made a few budget changes to get some laptops and to try to go mobile more, to try to get into the schools, into the departments, and then help people with stuff. And we're very gracious to approve it. And I just want to say thank you, because it made a tremendous difference in being able to go out with a laptop and make some changes with people there on site, and be able to show them things to where it would help them make a better decision with their health care. So I just want to give you a big thank you, because that, I think, when we look at the biggest change in the passive enrollment this year, I think that has to do with the communication and the laptops that y'all approved back, I think it was April or so. But I just want to say a big thank you to it, because I do believe it made a big difference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. All right, next on our agenda is the specialist software and related general fund budget amendment for the property assessor's office. Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lamont, would you like to come up and drive the bus here? And they have a demonstration too. You want to sit here, there? It's your request from the last time I did. Make sure I have some information for you. There we go. Okay, let me keep a couple here for me. I think I got enough. Here we are. I believe last month we presented, without the benefit of Mr. Lamont being able to be here, to give you a demo exactly on what how the system works. You requested specifically that we get some information from other jurisdictions, and I believe Darren has called and contacted them, and Mike may have as well, I'm not sure. Nick Christensen has also reviewed the contract, only found some minor modifications that might need to be made to it, and Mr. Lamont said that really isn't an issue. They're happy to comply with that. I'll let Darren just go ahead and...
Sure. We were asked to kind of evaluate the, what we thought, give our opinion on the specialist software. Kind of coming late to the game myself and introduced a specialist. So we decided to try to do our due diligence by reaching out to some agencies that we knew of that had specialists and had used specialists for a while. And honestly, we got really good reports from every one of them. All of them said that it was a fine product. The only thing that as far as us doing our due diligence in usual circumstances and given more time, I would have liked to have seen our data be ingested into the system and see how it performed. But given the fact that we're kind of stepping in late to this, I don't think that's really a feasible thing to ask necessarily. Given what we've learned from talking to these other agencies, that doesn't seem to be a problem that they had or had any issue with. Pulling the data up seemed to work just fine. Since the specialist company was easy to work with on making adjustments to ingest any of their data that they wanted to put in. So we couldn't really find any gotchas, so to speak, that we always typically look for with a software vendor. It looks like a fine product, and short of actually seeing it work, we can't say anything about anything bad about it. It looks like a good product. And definitely the tools section is very impressive. We really thought that was going to be a benefit to Mr. Mitchell, definitely.
Any questions from the committee to our IT people?
I have one. Why don't you have time to test it with our data?
Well, that was one of the things that we talked to Mr. Mitchell about. I think you were going to, Chris Brandon had talked about uploading some data.
I think he actually has.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you or the IT department work on any similar type programming to try to do this on our own?
We did, Mike?
Yeah, we worked with what would have been probably 1/4 of what this package is, one portion of the package to do comparable sales. And we had a pretty reasonable tool that was working, but it didn't have all the polish that Mr. Mitchell and his department required. And also the person that was working on that has left the county employee. So he got a job in New Mexico getting significantly more money.
And, going back to, I think, statements made earlier, there was only so far we could go to make it look identical without crossing into copyright issues, which we can't do. So,
Right.
But, we did as best we could with it, and could get close, but nowhere near as polished as their product.
Well, you said you could do 1/4 of what they're doing. What did you explain? that a little
Their
more?
package is essentially 4 pieces. Am I correct, Ian? Yeah, there's 4 pieces to them. We were doing just one small, 1/4 of that, one piece of that. The rest of it is, we don't have the tools for.
Any other questions from the committee to our IT people? Okay, please continue.
Yeah. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lamont. This is our data. He's got it loaded in on his laptop. I'll turn it over to you, Ian.
Yeah, it's on my laptop. For those of you who haven't met me before, I am from Northern Ireland, so I do have a little bit of an accent. But this is your data in the system. I ingested it, built a predictive model, and basically what it does is it does a reassessment, reappraisal. It helps Rob's team build stuff, so you can do 2 things to make things more efficient and save money or whatever. Hire more people or use technology. So I think Mr. Mitchell's idea is that he wants to leverage technology, and what this essentially does is it replicates what an assessor or an appraiser would do in the field. So it looks at every single property, it looks at what's sold in the immediate area, and it comes up with the value for every single property. So it's calibrated by Rob's staff, but the technology will improve the accuracy levels of the appraisals for this county. It'll make it more transparent, because for every property you'll have 5 comparables which people will understand. So if you get that as part of your visible tax bill, you'll be able to see actually where the assessed values have come from. So the demo I've got here, I'm happy to pass it around or whatever, but I've done a predictive model. We've got 5 comps for every property. We can have a look at the accuracy levels or whatever, but That's what our software provides. We just actually today got confirmation from Hamilton County that they're moving forward with us as well. So I've been working in Tennessee for 12 years. The company has been operating for 20 years. I wrote the algorithm behind the technology, so I've got a vested interest in this, but it's like my baby, and I would love to see it help Rob and the county of Rutherford.
Is there a way that, because a lot of the folks haven't seen what Commissioner Dodd and Commissioner Johnson saw, is there a way that we could pull up a website so that Ian could show you how it's used in another jurisdiction, just to kind of give everybody here?
What about this that's hooked up? Is there a...
There's an Explorers.
Yeah.
Hitman Explorer.
Can you get it there?
I mean, you can.
Can that laptop be, is there a USB in here that...
I guess you could. I think the IT guys are getting ready.
Can we plug in this laptop and use the
What have you got
screen as a monitor?
what kind of output port have you got on the output?
Yeah, I've got a little extension, but I suppose it depends what we want to look at, because as Darren said, there's 4 elements to this. The predictive stuff is on my laptop. The results of that we would share with the public is online, so we can have a look at the 3 other pieces and not the 4th. I'm happy enough to pass my laptop around and let people see it, but we can take a quick look at...
Sure. If you want to run the... Come on.
Is it our data online that
Yep. Well,
ingest?
what if you're looking at online, you'll be seeing different jurisdictions that already has it in place. Our data is on his laptop that's not online because we're not live with this yet.
So it takes us a bit of time to take all the information in and personalize it for an individual county. So I've done that with one product. I just haven't done it with the other 3. If I can...
Does your software pick up elevations on your particular lots?
Pictometry
That's
will.
That's one of the big complaints that I get is, well, my property's in a flood zone and it's comparable to this guy's house next door.
We could be able to layer anything onto that if we wanted. It's available right now through Pictometry online. But there would be a way that we can draft these over. We have flood zone layers and elevations that you can lay in and do the contours currently right now with the stuff that we have.
But if we acquire Spatialist, is it going to become the professional and public location where...
That's my goal.
And so, does it have topo?
Yep.
Yeah, it can use Pictometry, which is the technologies Rob's talking about.
But you don't have to go to another, you can simply check the topo layer.
Yep.
To answer the chairman's question.
Right. You can easily, our goal is to have everything readily accessible and easily transparent for any taxpayer that wants to see their property. If you want to see how much you pay in taxes, what effect a tax rate is going to be, there's a way that can be built in and is in King County, where you can go in and click on it. You can see it broken down with, well, this is the results if we adopt this, what this individual property's tax bill is going to be. So there is no mystery where your money is going and how it's being used.
So this is a quick example of your neighbours to the north. So this is Davidson, and what we've done is we've created a seamless search. It works a bit like Google. So instead of having to know an exact address or a parcel number or something like that, you can just start to type, and the more you type, the less information you see. So it's called Elasticsearch. So if I type in, for example, pig, it'll give me a list of all of the matches. I can see them on a map or an actual list. But if I select the first one, it'll search the records, it'll pull this stuff up, and this works on a smartphone, on a tablet, on whatever. So you've got a picture of the or a photograph of the property, you've got a location of the map, and then it's got links to other information. This is the Pictometry stuff that you just mentioned there, so you would see the topo information there. And then as we scroll down, we can get more information about the individual property, historic sales, all that good stuff. We can also see, for example, what's sold in the immediate area. So the red dot is the subject property. The yellow ones are sales that have happened in the immediate area that are similar to the subject.
How does that get in?
We pull all that information in from the CAMA system, the system that the assessor's office runs. So we basically sit on top of his system and then pull that information out on a transactional basis.
Where do you get your sales information?
As soon as they come up from the Registry of Deeds office.
The Register of Deeds, it's
on a daily
coming off
basis.
from there, okay.
So I'm just gonna...
You sell that information to him? You give that to him?
No, we only give it, we just buy the product to display it. All the information and all the data is ours, and there's no ownership of it other than ours.
So I've just selected 3 comps for that subject. So I can get a little report here, a location map, and a list of the information. For some reason, it's going on. So what we can do with this is, when we run the analysis, we generate comparable sales within the system. But whenever we push out the results, the people who maybe want to challenge that value might want to appeal that property value. Well, we'll give them this tool so that they can see exactly the same sales information that the office had, so that there's transparency there for the taxpayer, and they can choose the sales that they think best represent their property and then use that within an appeal process. Now, we've run this for a number of years throughout Tennessee and elsewhere, and we find between about 30 and 60% of people coming on to appeal will have a look at the market evidence up here. We'll figure out that actually it's not going to make a significant amount of difference to my property taxes, and they'll reverse out. So that'll save Rob's guys from having to deal with lots of appeals. So we're trying to use technology in that to make things more efficient and to make it more accessible to taxpayers who can see the same information that Rob's office has. So that's just one example of comparable sales analysis. We can look at tax transparency stuff. This is one of our clients is the City of Seattle. We've got, I think, 5 of the top 10 counties in North America. So this is what we call community. The idea behind this is that we can share information to people who are not GIS professionals, but they can use a map and they can navigate around. So as I move around the map, the statistics on the left-hand side will change. So people will see who's living there, what the median sale price is for that particular area. It's just looking at a particular map window. If we wanted to have a look at a particular area, for example, if somebody phones Rob's office and said, what's the average assessed value increase over the last 12 months in this particular district or whatever? So if I look at a council district, if this councillor wants to know what's happening in their area, it cookie cuts out automatically and reports stuff on the left-hand side. We can have a look at the assessment information, so what's in there. The residential breakdown. We can have a look at the sales in that area, so what's actually happening in this area. We can click on any of these to get more information, but what the assessor in this part of the world decided was, if there's additional bonds or levies that are being applied, he wants people who are voting for those to actually know exactly what that's going to affect their property taxes. So I've just selected a random property. Currently it's got almost $5,000 in property taxes, so this $4,905. There's a proposed new tax coming in that's going to add $20. There's another one coming in, a proposition that's going to add another $280, but there's one expiring, so the residual is $213. So people get an insight into what they're actually going to vote for in terms of levies that are going to make an impact on their property taxes. Again, it comes underneath the auspices of transparency and visibility. We're pulling stuff that's maybe in silos elsewhere, but we're bringing it together in an easy to access one source of information. So those are 3 of the things that we provide. The bit that I've got on my laptop is actually the predictive analysis bit. It's the bit that really skills up Rob's staff to make it more accurate and more efficient assessments. And I'm happy to take anyone through that if they want to take a look.
Do you have that compartment in one of these other counties?
All of those other counties, yeah.
So what you've been showing us, you said that was a third component.
Yeah, so I've shown you 3 components up there. The 4th is here.
Do you have the 4th for someone else? That you-
I can't show it. It's not online. It's on a desktop because it runs analysis, and there could be.
That's not a public.
No, this isn't.
domain. Okay.
Yeah, everything. Once we generate it, then we share it. But this is, say for example, you've got 150-some thousand parcels, whatever. If we use 10 fields and analyze that, that's 150 raised to the power of 10 for computation. It's faster to do it on a PC.
Gotcha. And your guys, your assessors would be utilizing that
Right.
aspect, but not the public.
No, the public wouldn't utilize this.
Okay.
And as has been said before, I think the county is experiencing, our office in particular, has been experiencing a brain drain. We've furnished a good number of people that the state hires to do appraisals at the state level. So the county trains the people up, and similar with pretty much all departments. I know that Chief Lowry has the same problem. We train them, we give them their skills, we spend the money, and then another jurisdiction of the state will hire them and pay them more money, and they get a good trained employee. That still doesn't negate our responsibility to produce a professional and accurate product to the citizens. This provides a level of skill that would take time and additional money to train someone to do it, and then there's no guarantee that we'll be able to train them. The software we have, we can train the individuals to use the software much quicker and much less expensively than we can train them to learn the knowledge themselves, which they can take with them should they decide to go and work for the state across town. So that's what our goal is. Our goal is to provide our assessors a higher level of skill, give them a greater level of confidence, share the information that we have in an easily digestible manner with the public to make your jobs as commissioners easier, so that you're not getting all the calls with people going, why are my taxes going up? I just wrote my property tax. Where are you spending it? Where's my value? They'll be able to go on there and they'll be able to make that determination. They'll say, oh, well, so much is going here. Yeah, I like that. So much is going here. I understand we need that. So they can either call you and support you in your decisions, or they can say, you know, maybe we better think about this another way. They probably won't say it that nicely, but you're able to give them the information. I particularly like that this is formatable. It can be broken down by any subsets that you want. It can be broken down on a neighborhood basis. It can be broken down on a commissioner's district. It can be broken down in a particular school zone, so that if there are any particular needs that any part of the county we need to look at, all that information is easily and readily accessible at one site with one click.
So the cost savings of the county is, we don't need as much personnel.
Over 10 years, the predicted, and these are the numbers right here as best we get, over a 10-year implementation period, we'll save about $1.3 million.
And so how much is there, so we've got the software, and what is yearly maintenance or
Yeah,
upgrades?
that's including the annual maintenance fees that would go in there. Those are calculated on the back over a 10-year period of time. It'd be roughly $70,000 a year. First year implementation to acquire and installs right around 100.
That was the problem I was having. The initial cost is not bothering me. It's this yearly $70,000 that's kind of giving me heartburn there. Who will maintain these systems and update them? I think I said that y'all would be picking that up. I believe what you said. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The way we calibrate it is that the main analytical system will be live, so it's a transactional thing. As soon as somebody logs on, the data comes straight in. The rest of the systems that are online typically will be updated about 3 a.m. every morning. And then we grab the data every night about an hour before that. So we maintain all of that stuff. So the license fees, the annual license fees that you've mentioned, include all of the support, the maintenance, and the hosting of all of this stuff. So Darren doesn't have to worry about getting additional server capacity. We maintain the uptime. If there's any downtime because of server capacity issues or whatever, we'll repay back a proportion of the fees. So we encourage our servers to be up 99.99% of the time. But so as part of the agreement, we'll do all the hosting, the maintenance, and the update.
Okay, I got a couple more questions along these lines here. How long have you been doing Davidson County?
About 12 years.
About 12. Because I've done some research on theirs, and it was about 15 years ago. So a lot of that information on the system they had then, which I'm not sure evidently was prior to yours. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there that's got this information. You just got to shop around a little. It looks like you're kind of supermarketing it for us and putting it in one basket. But the other thing that comes back and just kind of slams me in the face is, since this is open to the public and anybody can get online, who's in charge of the security if we get hacked and they say, you want your information, we want so many Bitcoins? Who's going to take care of that problem?
Well, it's a one-way street, really, because we're pushing the information out. We're not sending anything back. So even if they try and hack our site, they'll just get pulled information that we're getting up on a nightly basis anyway. So that's a moot point, really. They can't get back into the system because we have a one-way connection to them.
So they can't come in and block us from getting to our own information, is
No,
what
sir.
you're trying to tell me.
Not through our technology.
But if they did, then who would be taking care of that? Well, that silence
These are the same
answers my
people that were
question.
taking care of it now if somebody managed to hack into our system.
Well, like I said, is this system, if we purchase it, is it our system, or is that still your systems that you're maintaining it?
No, sir. It's the system is nothing without your data in it. So it only becomes live, really, and alive whenever your data goes in it. We never take control of the data. It's our system. It's your system, but we're maintaining on your behalf, and it's always your data.
I'm looking for a better analogy, and I can't think of it.
I'll give you one example of the hacking issue. One of our clients is Mecklenburg, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. Their system got hacked, about 18 months ago or so. But it went straight into the actual system itself. The information that we had that was pushed out was still intact because it was contained. It wasn't linked back to the main site. So we were able to actually help them get their system back up and running, but they had to get rid of some of the internal viruses. And Darren, I'm happy enough to connect you with some of the people from Mecklenburg, but we helped them out a little bit there just because we had a silo of information that was separate from their internal system.
Mr. Chairman, what's the initial cost? What's the yearly cost? And how would this equate to personnel-wise, saving money on personnel to do this?
Yeah, we've
I
got,
see this.
No,
Well,
flip it over. You've got number 12.
okay.
we at current rates, given that we're 6 people lower now in our office than we were in 2008, to be where we would need to be without this system, we would anticipate having to hire 1 new appraiser a year. With this, we'll still have to hire people, but we anticipate, worst case, having to hire somebody once every 2 years. It may actually be once every 3, because I don't like to hire people if I don't have to. But figuring a worst case scenario out there, you plan for the worst and you hope for the best. So if we had to hire somebody every 2 years, that's a conservative estimate. It could be higher. The savings could actually be higher on it. But conservatively, over the next 10 years, we'd anticipate hiring another 5 people in the office, both appraisers and service personnel.
Is that what this savings you projected
That's
is
part of the
based on
savings right
hiring
there.
3 people or not versus not?
That's a portion of it. The other savings is in the administrative savings of having to handle customer service calls and claims. Just like you pointed out, we based most of our predictions on reappraisal years, so we broke that out on the customer service cost over there. Over the next 10 years, we will have 3 reappraisals. And those costs per year we anticipate at just current levels, without building inflation in, just to handle the calls and the customer service calls for appeals at about $137,000 a year.
Why does your cost go up if your staff doesn't go up?
If the staff doesn't go up?
No, you said that on the reappraisal years, it goes up to that. Do you hire additional staff for reappraisal years?
No.
And then how do you get, if you've got the same number of staff, only they're handling more calls, where's that cost come from? Why are you doubling in cost from one year to the next?
That's the cost is there. That's the cost to provide the service. They're doing other things. We job shift. We shift from making calls to inputting deeds to inputting permits. We just don't have people just answering the phone, taking calls, and doing nothing else. They're also inputting permits. So the time away from inputting permits is shifted over when the calls come to answering the calls and doing customer service. So there's an actual decrease in our ability to do one job while they are shifted over to do another, and that's where the actual cost comes in. You job shift, you cross-train individuals in the office, so you're not having to hire specialized people that only answer the phone or specialized people that only input deeds.
But your bottom line budget doesn't change from year to year, those numbers. It doesn't, your bottom line budget doesn't have that swing of this, right?
No, I haven't built that in there.
I just want to make sure I'm tracking
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
numbers as you put
No.
them in there.
Now, every year my budget adjusts and shifts because we'll shift things from one line item to another to make sure that we have enough to make things through. And if we don't have to buy it, we don't. Or if we figure, well, it's coming into a slow period, there's no need to hire a person now, we won't. We'll delay it until it's absolutely necessary to pull it in, or just prior to when we'll need them, so we have adequate time to train them and ramp up to that period. So it's a complex juggling act. But we figured out how to do it fairly well with what we have. We just know that with the growth in Rutherford County, we can't continue to do things the same way that we did. And we're at the point now, we either invest in the technology to help us work better and smarter, or we're going to have to invest in the people, because as they shift over to do one thing, we're going to have someone else available to come in and do what they were doing because they're having to do something else. And that's, my attempt was to monetize that cost right there and say, well, this is how much it costs to answer the phone, this is how much we pay the individuals, this is the amount of time that it takes, how many of these are transferred up to where they have to go to a senior appraiser or have to go to a director, what's their median salary, how many minutes does it take to resolve that, what's the number value with that, calculate that out and then put a number on it.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, to me, you've got X number of employees, and basically that's a fixed cost. As long as you've got X number of employees. Now, you may be assigning them different work, so those cost centers for a more expensive employee could go up and down in a particular budget year. I can understand that, but as far as the cost varying, I don't see that with the same number of employees. I mean, that's a fixed.
Unless it's overtime. Once you get overtime, that'd be the only way that number would go up.
Right.
Yeah, and we don't grant overtime. So what usually happens, and if you only have so many people, you have to prioritize. What do you have? You triage. What do you have? What must you get done in order to get the information into the state that's required? What must you do? And what do you not do? That's a choice. So sometimes things are done not as we would like them. We've managed to hire some very good people. We've replaced other personnel that have left with more efficient personnel. So when Lisa asked, when is the sales information updated? The state gives you 30 days. We can now do it usually within 2. A lot of times that same day we get it inputted and into the system. That's because of the way we've trained the people that we have, and we've got people that will pick up the load if they get behind. We've trained people that will come in and will pick up the additional work so that they don't get behind. But we're reaching the point that the volume of work coming in, that it's going to reach a point right here. We can't come back to you every year and ask for more money, or every 6 months.
Well,
And we don't.
that argument makes sense to me because, this is probably the most important office as far as money being generated for the county for our property taxes is, where the lion's share of our money is generated.
Yeah.
And, that's got to be correct. It's got to be fair. If a guy's house burned down and we give him the same tax bill as he had last year, that's not right.
No, it's not.
So, those have to be updated, and I understand the need there. It's just, you're finally talking my language when you went on that tack, because I know how important it is that these assessments are right and fair.
I have 2 questions. We were talking about the data going in, and you said you get it from the Register of Deeds office.
Mm-hmm.
Will they have access to this, and can they enter it directly, or does it have to come to your office to be entered?
It has to come to our office to be entered.
Okay, so they can't, there's no way to enter it from there, so it's only entered once.
Yeah, well, they scan their information. Our information has to be manually keyed into the system.
Okay.
No, it's a complicated system that exists in the Register of Deeds office. They have a company, I think Bayer, it's Progress, is who their software vendor is, that actually stores their data, and it's a contract that goes back maybe 15, 20 years. And just as Chairman P.
You were just talking about staffing, so I'm just trying to think of efficiencies in staffing. Like,
Yeah.
don't key it twice if we don't have to, but you're saying that it can't be done.
No,
But-
well, if we had access to the data, we could have it show in our CAMA system, and there are ways that we could do that more efficiently. We just simply, the software vendor, since the software vendor with the Register of Deeds office actually does own the data, the Register of Deed doesn't. So getting them to allow us to have that data imported directly, we've requested many times to do that, and their software vendor has been very reluctant, because what they do is they package it up and they turn it around and they sell it to the real estate industry, to companies like CRS that realtors generally use to compile data to do their MLS listings and sell their property. They do that for a fee. If we had that data, we wouldn't, our intention isn't to sell it. Our intention is to just import it into our system so that there is possibly one less keystroke that has to be made to expedite the process.
I have a second question that's you kind of led me there on that second part. The way your quote is, Ian, you've broken it out into the 4 different elements that you offer. Do you sell it a la carte? Could we buy just the piece that's going to help Rob and not do the consumer piece yet?
You can slice and dice it whatever way you want. We encourage and actually give a significant reduction for things going en masse, because it means that there's less costs in the deployment, because we don't have to do it 4 times for 4 different things. We do it simultaneously. But if you want, yes, you can take pieces of it. Some of our clients do. Most of them end up buying all 4 at some point anyway.
I just know when we did the jail system, we did records management 1 year, and we did, all the other pieces. I don't remember all the acronyms, but we did each one of them like a year.
CAD was first, records and jails was second, but they were dependent on one another.
Yeah, and it helped us space out the cost as well. So I'm just curious.
It's interesting, because probably a huge project like the jail project or whatever, just to bring this into perspective, most of these sites, the build time from start to deploy is between 3 and 5 days. So it's not a huge effort in terms of time. The only one that's a little bit longer is the desktop, the analytical piece, because we have to write a customized training manual, and then we have to train the staff. So that takes 2 or 3 weeks to actually do. So, but most of this other stuff is 3 to 5 days, and it's
So
live.
which one of these is the analytical?
It's called the Appraisalist. It's probably the biggest.
That's the. I've got Comper Community Spatialist Appraisal. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the one at the bottom of on the first page of the proposal.
So that's the sort of internal one for the office, for all the analytical stuff. So to come up with value, to measure things, analyze stuff.
So if we bought them separately, what's the difference in cost versus buying all of them together?
Well, we offered a 20% discount on the 3 products that were if they were going to be bought separately, or sorry, all in one. So you'd have to add 20% onto the individual line items for everything else.
So I think what you have on your iPad is 2017. We don't have a current quote. And I think you note if you select more than one, we will offer a discount. So are these discounted or are these not discounted that we have here?
I don't know what's on your iPads, but whatever quotes, do you have the original or the stuff that I sent you recently?
I don't have it with me. I think I sent an email over with
Is that
before. I think there was.
Okay, so these don't reflect the 20% discounts. So those would actually be
what you would pay.
What you would pay for them individually, but it's 20% off those line items from that particular cost.
So Ian, you have 4 parts, right?
Yes, sir.
So if the county were to buy, what would you suggest if they didn't want to buy all 4 parts? Can you buy just one, or do you have to have one to back up the other one? Which one or 2 would you have to buy?
You can buy each one separately.
Okay.
My recommendation would be, for the office's benefit, the Appraisalist product is probably the biggest win because it's an internal thing, but the public would not enjoy any access to any of the resultant analysis. If you wanted to not buy all 4, my recommendation would probably be Appraisalist and Comper, because then you can share some of that with the citizen. I have found that whenever we do things like this, sometimes when there's a push and there's an engagement with the public, it's better to basically show them that we're changing all of this stuff rather than changing it, this 6 months here,
Internally.
yeah, 12 months later, or whatever. But it's entirely up to the committee, what you want to push forward.
So the Spatialist appraisal tool set, is that internal technology that makes your guys most effective? It's
one you can't see, right?
It's the 26 plus the 15.
Yeah.
Correct. That package.
Yes, sir.
That's your retail cost without the discount. So it could be, Rhonda, it could be that, potentially that component to get his assessors a technology leg up or hand up, if I'm hearing you right.
Okay, so this proposal is $107,000, so 20% off would be $21,400 less? Because you said these numbers don't reflect the...
Well, unfortunately, I thought that the correct numbers had been supplied. I don't have those right to hand here, but the way that the 20% stuff works is you buy the principal component, and then anything subsequent to that gets a 20% discount on the software charges. So it would be 20% off 107, it would be 20% off the 3 remaining
The 3
pieces.
add-ons.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So 41,000 would be the minimum recommended component, if
Entry.
I'm hearing it right.
And then what's the maintenance fee on that?
There's no maintenance fee, there'll just be that recurring license fee. So it's software as a service, basically. So we provide this software on an annual basis. So it'll be, in that particular item case, it would be 26.15 for one-time implementation and training, and then 26 recurring.
Is there an escalator?
No.
No.
And tell me again what the 26 recurring is?
What's that?
Tell me again what the 26 recurring is?
Well, the example that the commissioner just said was that if you wanted to get one component, the analytical piece that I've got here, that's one option. That's 26 plus 15 for training. The recurring cost of that would be 26.
So you're just renewing your lease every year?
Yeah, that's
And
exactly it.
what task, and you're still continuing to do your $26,000 task, do you help upload and keep this live and active for the benefit of the appraisers? So you're actively involved with your personnel?
Yes, sir.
So it's a $26,000 person or staff to give you guys access to utilize technology to be more proficient. Right. Am I?
That's it in a nutshell. The idea behind this is that instead of every 4 years having a reappraisal and all of the stress on the run up to that and the sticker shock price because of things have increased and people don't really understand what the market is doing. The idea behind this analytical piece is to do that reappraisal on a monthly cycle so that you're measuring and understanding what the market is doing, where the market is hot in certain areas, maybe understanding what's driving that, as it land use code changes or whatever. But the idea is that gently and easily you train people up so that whenever the 4-year period comes, it's just a matter of basically muscle memory. They've done this so many times before, it's just a matter of doing it again. There's no shocks in here from fiscal management policy because we know what the market is and where it's going up to. So there's not a big shock and say, well, actually our budget forecast was this, but the market has tanked and it's now down here. So the idea behind this is to prep, and not just for the assessor's office, but for the fiscal health of the county.
I can see Lisa finding it valuable to know, predict perhaps more successfully what the income will be.
Projections. Commissioner Johnson.
The bottom line is, being penny wise and pound foolish, what's the best recommendation you can come up with? That we need to be very conservative in expenditures we have, but we need to get the bang for the buck. So if it's more prudent to buy the whole package, what we're going to get. So, you know, you can be penny, like I said, you can be penny wise and pound foolish. So we need to do what's best for everybody concerned.
Right, but you're talking about the difference between $41,000 and with the discount $93,800 and a recurring cost of $26,000 versus a recurring cost of $70,000. And your entire pitch really has been staff, internal, we need this, that's where the savings is going to come from. There's lots of nice little twinkly lights out there for other people to gain benefit from, and I don't discount it at all. I really don't. I mean, it's impressive software. But in terms of what we need to be writing a check for, I'm not convinced we need to write the check for the other pieces. They just feel unnecessary for what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. That's my 2 cents.
I think we might find them of value perhaps, but you may be right, it might be of value to load it up next year, get our hands around this one, and then, because I think that if this predictive model is successful, Rob's folks are building or have access to this, I think the community might learn to use this to see where their property's going, but that might not be necessarily year 1, that might be year 4.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the public's going to want to, I would think the public could, it could really be of value to the taxpayer to watch that predictive model. Because they don't get, I don't understand they don't get this, but I like the idea of starting slow though, but I have a feeling we're going to get here.
Now, I looked at all the YouTube links that you had for different counties, I guess Montgomery County, Sumner, Wilson, I forget what all. Did they have the entire package? Did they start with the entire package, or they do piecemeal, like we're asking about here?
Well, Davidson, because we've been with them so long, some of these products are only coming on like in the last few years or whatever, so they've bought incrementally. Sumner bought the appraisalist piece and Comper, so did Aaron up in Montgomery. Today, Hamilton bought 2 of the products, so it's horses for courses. Sometimes, for example, this particular piece that's up on the screen here, the community piece, that's probably the bit that would be the nicest to have. Some of these other things are much more logical to have. So, in answer to your question, some of them have bought all of it, and some of them have bought a few pieces, and there's been reasons for that. Davidson's got everything.
And what's this particular piece here, what is that one called again?
That's called Community. And the idea behind that is to push information out to citizens and let them understand it really easily. It would be the result of analysis. So the predictive stuff that you're looking at, you can see the way that the property market is going in a particular area. So for example, as I move around this, we can see what's actually happening. And these are sales that occurred in the last few days. So we can see a market, and we can start to see, is it increasing, is it decreasing, what's the effect, all that sort of stuff. So that's probably the shiniest toy, but it's probably not the most pragmatic if you're extremely cautious about financial considerations.
Like I said, it's the recurrent cost that keeps knocking on my door, makes me look at it. Pictometry, doesn't it have a link where you can go in and look at your property and your neighbor's property also?
It has a layer on pictometry. When you click over, you can see the aerial image, search around it, and there are layers that you can click and lay the values over.
It's not as easily to get to as what we got there. Okay. Well, committee, we got any more questions for these guys? Rob, do you have anything else?
As far as the employee cost savings, is that primarily going to be coming from the appraisal tool set, having that part?
Part of it will. The customer service cost would be from having Community and Comper, with people being able to look up and see their values, do their own comps and their own appeals without calling in and tying up staff answering their questions for them. It turns it into more of a self-serve rather than having to have somebody walk them through it.
And so the meat of it, I guess, is appraisal tool set.
Right.
And the other 3 is transparency type related.
Yep.
So it's if the one component to help his staff and one component to have some public access would be $63,000 initially and $46,000 a year. It's one employee, whatever that.
Which one are you looking at?
Comper and appraisal tool set. I assume it's $20 a year to maintain the Comper. If it's $20 to purchase, I'm not doing the discount. I'm just.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it'd be $46,000 a year, and the employees are at 46, 45, 246. Just to put a perspective on it. And you get a staff for that employee cost. You get a lot. It's like a lot of input and support from that one employee is how I'm putting my mind around it.
Right.
I can see doing.
Well, We've had some good discussion there. Do I have a recommendation?
I'd like to make a motion to allow Rob to purchase the Specialist Appraisal Tool Set in combination with the Copper by Specialist, with the cost to be determined with this 20% math.
But the 20% doesn't happen until you buy them all, right?
No, ma'am. It's if you buy the second piece,
The second piece?
yeah, or third or fourth.
Okay.
As long as there's a multiple, there's a saving for us in terms of the deployment.
Gotcha.
So the
Okay.
20% is in there.
So it'll be a few grand off this second
Yeah.
component, so it's,
But if we came back next year to buy another one, the 20% wouldn't apply to that.
No, sir. Correct. It's just because we have to build everything from scratch.
can a component be dropped?
Yes, there's a 30-day notice, and so if you're not happy with something, you can drop it.
I stand by my motion.
You're referring to this first item and the third item, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I second his motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do I hear any more discussion?
How do you get Mr. Mitchell's information? Does he have to send it to you?
Yes and no. We deploy the internal system in his office for access by all of his staff, and we, as part of the setup, we will get a connection. It's a transactional connection through an API. So basically, every time he launches the application, it goes into his system, pulls all his information out, and prepares it for the user.
What's an API?
It's basically a process of grabbing information from one place and bringing it somewhere else.
Okay.
So it connects it.
I'm slow.
No. The other way we get stuff is through a stored procedure that will take Mr. Mitchell's data and we'll push it up to a secure FTP site. Then we'll grab it from there, we'll pull it, and we'll push it live to some of the online systems. So that circumvents the piece about the threat of accessing the main system. It's always a one-way process. We're only pulling the information. He's actually sending it to us. We're not going in there. So there's no threat of being hacked that way. Yeah. So for those two pieces that the Commissioner has mentioned, those would utilize those two services. A direct connection into his database so he sees information live, and then a nightly update for the online stuff that would be shared with the folks of this county.
So some of his employees are still going to have to do some of the work to get it to you?
No, sir. That's all part of the setup. We'll do the stored procedure, and we'll do the API connection. So all they have to do is press the button. There's no heavy lifting from the IT department at all. We'll do all of that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, then call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
No.
Commissioner Allen?
No.
Commissioner Peak?
No.
Passes 4-3.
Motion carries. This will be forwarded to the full commission next Thursday. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Great, thank you so much.
Going to Maryland.
Yeah.
Going to Maryland.
Yeah.
Okay, general purpose school fund budget amendments. We've got 3 of those. Welcome, Doug.
Mr. Spurlock is at the zoning meeting tonight with Wilson Elementary in Walker Hills.
Good times.
What'd you say, Robert?
Good times, yeah.
That'll be stressful.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Do you have the budget amendments first on the agenda? It's, this is the first one, I believe, is it the Safe School grant that you're looking at?
Yes.
What that is is to budget for the revenues and expenditures for the 2019-20 Safe School Grant. Grant application was approved by the school board at the September 18th board meeting. With the recommended motion is to approve the budget for the 2019-2020 Safe Schools Grant that was approved by the school board and the State Department of Education.
So moved. Wait, yeah, just do it, sorry.
The
donations.
The donation from.
You want to go ahead and get the donations. The second budget amendment is, it is for the walking track, to help fund a walking track from, it's a donation from the Richard Siegel Foundation. And part of this is for a walking track at Rocky Fork Elementary School, as well as funding for a Go Noodle online activity subscription for student health programs. With the recommended motion to budget for the donations for the Richard Siegel Foundation and for the non-recurring expenditures related to these donations.
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any questions? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Dodd? Yes. Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen? Commissioner Peak?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, next is a resolution of support for the Tennessee Local Education Capital Investment Act.
It's on. They got it.
They've got the
This is some information. I've shared this with, Ms. Frog, I shared this with the school board. And what this is a joint resolution with the Board of Education and the Rutherford County Commission to support this legislation, which went through last year in the General Assembly. It was placed behind the budget. Of course, was not funded. They had other funding priorities in the state. However, there's been a lot of discussion of putting that back in the hopper. This resolution would be, of course, a support to get that not only back in the hopper at the state level, but also to request the governor to consider putting it in his proposed budget that he's working on, starting, I guess, really getting into it this month. What this would do if it passed is it would allow, if you look, it would allow a portion of the state sales tax that is generated in Citus in Rutherford County to come back to the county instead of going to the state, to be earmarked for school debt service or capital projects, basically allowing us to keep a small portion of that state sales tax here within the county where it was generated. This would mimic a law that was passed in 2006 called the Tennessee River Resort Act, which allowed some of the counties along the Tennessee River to do the same thing, to bring back some of that state portion of sales tax generated in their county. They earmarked it for economic development purposes. So my point with that is, this is a sound model. They've used it for years. This was carried last year by Jack Johnson in the Senate from Williamson County and William Lambert in Sumner County. And just to give you an idea of what we're talking about money-wise, if you look on these right here, this gives, if this had passed this last session of the General Assembly, this was the impact that fiscal review put together. You see Rutherford County down towards the bottom. This would have brought in an estimated $3,760,904 for this current fiscal year that we're in sales tax back to the county. The city of Murfreesboro would have received $696,702 estimated to be earmarked for education, debt service, or capital projects. Our portion, it would have been about a 50 and 60% increase in the budgeted development tax, if the equivalent of an increase if we had received this. So if we had, the Board of Education, when we spoke about this, if you go to the very back, you'll see this was presented. This is the capital projects that Trey Lee, the Assistant Superintendent of Maintenance and Engineering developed this as requested by both the board and the commission to look at the older schools, our existing schools. Of course, we've been so busy building new schools. Of course, then the issues is what about the older ones as they age out? This is the capital needs, the major issues that he's identified, and you can see on the very back page, it arrives at $68,134,000. And as you can tell, this, we're talking about HVAC, roofs, we're not talking about any bells and whistles here. The concept would be if that funding was brought in through this bill, could issue a bond or loan and basically utilize this new revenue stream to finance bringing all the schools up. And then, of course, the capital project fund funding needs for capital needs today and going forward. So this would bring us up to where we need to be with the schools, the capital infrastructure needs.
Look, just out of curiosity, maybe you know from your prior job, this money that we're asking for, where is that going now? Is it
State general
dedicated to education in the state?
Half of it would decrease in the state general fund. The other half, of course, is earmarked out to BEP for the rest of the counties. This would be a decrease in that state general fund portion. Yes, sir.
This $32,800,000 just come out of the state general fund?
I just wanted to make sure we weren't borrowing from Paul. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, it's a good point. It's basically it would be where they're saying, where the state's saying they're having a large surplus. That's where we would basically bring back some of the revenue being generated here for capital needs.
Well, this is a really good idea because we end up subsidizing the smaller counties with our sales tax, and if we can keep it here to fund our schools, this is one of the best ideas. We've talked about this before, but this is a really good idea, and I'll make a motion that we send this on to the full commission.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's call roll on this one.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Fee?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, then we have at least one more from Doug, resolution to authorize the use of purchasing card by the Board of Education.
What this is it's required that, we request and the county commission authorize the Board of Education to have a purchasing card, i.e. credit card, for use at the Board of Education. The school board, as you see, they updated a board policy to allow for credit cards and credit lines. What we're finding in our purchasing department is, especially with technology and some CTE education training items, some of the vendors no longer want to take a check. They don't even want a purchase order. They want, to use it on online purchase. For those items, this would allow the Board of Education to purchase those items online. When I brought this to Health and Ed, of course, we have the credit card procedures, which for internal controls that we developed. Based on what Health and Ed said, we placed a $10,000 limit into the policy. But also, one of the commissioners on the Health and Ed brought up that, to be wary of any cash back points or anything like that might be in there. I've spoke with the purchasing director and informed her, so we're going to have just a basic governmental card with nothing.
No perks.
Yes,
No trap.
No trap points. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who has the cards?
That would be in my office, and it would be secured under the purchasing agent under me. So it's right around the corner.
One
Is
card?
that central? Yeah, one card is central.
And we have that in the county, we've had that for several years, the same, and for the same reason, that we needed software, some kind of technology, and they would not take a PO, they wouldn't take a check. So,
If
we
Health
faced
is
that
for it,
for
I'm
several.
for it. I just wanted that question.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
The second, Commissioner Dodd. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pease?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Mr. Bowden.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is the general fund budget transfer for emergency management.
No, planning engineering.
Yep, excuse me. Planning and
Planning and
engineering,
engineering.
sorry. Thank you. However, since y'all, planning and engineering. Well, I was going to say,
Go ahead, Doug.
I want y'all to stay because the next one, I've got questions for. Okay. So we can go ahead and continue like this.
Okay, great.
Let's do Doug, you'll do Doug first.
Yeah.
Let's stick with Doug. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Just, we just did a Doug switch here, lottery for Demasi, so. That's fine. We just have just a quick budget amendment for you to consider tonight. This was brought to Public Works just a couple days back. This is just moving around a little bit of money within our budget. This is not new money. As you recall, during the last budget year process, we did put some money into operating lease payments for 3 new vehicles for the inspectors, our construction inspectors. Those vehicles have been delivered. They're very good vehicles, very nice vehicles, very happy with them. But they also, we need to have the emergency lighting, the safety lighting, both amber and white on the top and then on the grill of the vehicle, and I believe one on the back as well for safety. That money was not part of the lease operating payments originally, but there is a little bit of extra money in there as we budgeted for an entire year for the lease, and we just took delivery of the vehicle, so there is a little extra money there. So we're just asking for $1,500 to move from operating lease payments to other supplies and materials for that lighting. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second, Pearson. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pease?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Doug, if you don't mind sticking around. We've got something coming up right after that I need to ask you or Mike a question or two on. Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Hunt.
All right, we're coming to the table this evening to ask for permission to move forward to apply for a mitigation grant.
Well, hold it.
Yes.
You got a
We're gonna
budget
do this.
amendment first.
This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, you're going to do that one.
I'm doing this one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is, I'll agreed in a previous meeting to upgrade one of the secretary position to another higher grade position. We're just moving the money. So I'm moving $49,147 into the supervisor director line item.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, or is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pease?
Yes, motion carries. Now, this is one why I was asking y'all to stick around. Mr. Hooker, please go ahead.
All right. We have available opportunity for a federal mitigation grant concerning the buyout of several properties in the county who have suffered repetitive losses due to flooding in the county. This started out with approximately 20 homeowners in the county that were on a list to be in line for this grant. Notification was sent out from the engineering department for people to opt into the program. We had a response from 7 residents who are interested in the buyout procedure. This would be a matching grant. It's not completely covered by the federal government. Federal government pays for 75%. The state will put in 12.5%, and the county will put in for 12.5%. So the total is about $2.5 million, but our portion of that would equate to about $308,000 and change. Mike has some data on flood statistics for these homes. If you'd like to hit on that.
Thank you, Tim. Several of these houses reached out to us to try to help relieve flooding problems, and we have worked with, engineering has worked with the Highway Department, Public Works, trying any way we could find to help alleviate some of these problems. And the first one we have is at 5840 Washington Boulevard, and it has had repetitive loss over the years. A lot of these are older subdivisions that that essentially do not drain well. They were not in a FEMA flood zone. I'll turn on the map, hopefully it'll work. They're all essentially in Zone X, which means it's not a FEMA flood zone, but it's a localized flood zone. Much of the county is a karst area. There's several depressions. This is one of them. This is from the May 2010 flood here, but we also have other imagery, pictometry, which they mentioned before. This is from February of this year. The house flooded again, and I'm sure it's flooded at other times as well. Gets into their ductwork, floods their HVAC system. They've had septic systems. Yes, sir. A lot of issues with their septic systems. These older subdivisions are all on conventional septic systems. This is the first one. The second one is just down the street on Adams Drive. Let's see, 5943 Adams Drive. And it's same situation, built in a karst area. The plat, I believe, this one was from the 70s, I believe. The information was not as good as it is today. We didn't have all the technology and all the benefits of that brings to us. So we're trying to resolve these issues. Like I said, we worked with the highway department and could not find a solution to that. And then I'll pull up the plat. 1972. So it was a simple subdivision, essentially lines on a page dividing the property. And like I said, these over and over again, these areas, they don't drain to creeks, rivers, and streams. They just essentially are they're bowls. And I'll turn on the contours, and you can kind of see it's just like ring after ring of an enclosed bowl that does not drain. The second one, and I'll try to go through this quickly. I mentioned was Adams Drive. There's another one on Roanoke Drive. Also in FEMA flood zone X, not in a FEMA flood zone, but in a localized flood zone. This is the 2010 flood event. This, let's see, we have another one from last year's is actually next door there. This one is under last year's grant application. We're still waiting to hear back from that. Let's see, and Roanoke Drive is essentially the same situation. Floods, gets into the ductwork underneath the house, on the septic system. So it's a tremendous situation. Every time it rains, we have to help these people out. A lot of times they have to move out to go to a hotel. They have to go to a friend's house or something like that. They can't flush. They can't wash clothes or dishes or anything like that. Another one that we're applying for is 650 Baker Road. This subdivision is from the 50s. Then the septic system floods pretty heavily. I've got some photographs of that. Fortunately, it just gets to the house, not into the house yet, but this is their backyard. It's up to you can see the threshold of the house here, and there's several photographs like that. This is their septic system area, so it stays in water. It does not drain out for a week or more sometimes. They had to stay out a couple weeks in February when it rained it, and they could not flush or wash dishes or anything like that.
But you said that one doesn't get into the house?
It has not
Not
yet,
yet.
from what they've told us. So we're fortunate about that, but
They do have sewage issues.
they do have sewage issues. They've had it backed up into their house, and they've got young kids, and they do not relish that every time it rains.
So y'all haven't been able, on all these you're showing
Yes,
us,
sir.
to come up with any alternatives to draining these?
Yes, sir.
For those of you that aren't familiar with a car system, just for rudimentary, is a underground cavernous system that typically can have water running through it on a continuous basis, but if a storm front comes through and stalls for any length of time and dumps a measurable amount of water, these car systems flood, and the only place for them to come is up, but there's no place for them to flow. There's no tributaries or rivers or creeks or streams to carry the water off. So when you get them in a bowl, they just tend to stagnate.
Mr. Dodd, just a quick question. Yes, sir. This come through Public Works? I
It
didn't
did.
see it on the agenda.
It did.
How did that fare there?
It passed unanimously, but with reservations, serious reservations, hoping that we would vet some of that up here. So one task for us was to try to dig through some of our concerns.
With Tim bringing it, I didn't see it at Public Safety, and that's
Yeah.
why I was asking. I missed the Public Works meeting. But, how many more do you got, Mike?
Well,
Or is that it?
We need to see Rockville.
Oh, yes, Rockville is another one.
Robert, you'll see, Mr. Chairman, it's unique.
Let's see.
I want to talk
Get my
about it
glasses
too.
back on. Let's see, 18. See it on here.
It was actually Rockville Road. You had photographs and
Thought I had it saved on this one. I don't see it, but
11098.
okay. And this is essentially a two-lot subdivision, pretty recent. This is Concord Creek, Salem Highway, Highway 99, Rockville Road. They, unfortunately, and I'll get to them from my bookmarks here, I apologize. This also says FEMA's flood zone X, but we did some research on that, panned out a little bit. FEMA essentially stopped the flood study farther upstream to save money. So, and as soon as it'll pull up, I'll show you. It terminated with a straight edge, and there it is, right there. So, the flood hazard area did not disappear because they decided to save money and stop their study. It continued on, but when this was approved, it was evaluated, and it assumed that it was a flood zone X, not in a flood hazard area. So that's a mislabeled area. FEMA is looking at reevaluating the Stones River watershed, but I don't believe they're going to continue a lot of these studies. This goes to the Harpeth River, so this one's not being studied right now. But they have a lot of issues with this one as well. They've sent a lot of photographs. This is a photograph from their back porch. Fishing off their back porch. This is Rockville Road, and I'll show you some other photographs where their water's flowing over Rockville Road. There's a better image of that. And there's several images of water in their house. This is their garage. Water, seeping into the house, causing all kinds of damage. But this is what we're trying to do. we've looked and looked and did not see a way to alleviate this problem or the other problems. We've tried and tried with the highway department and could not find a solution to that. So that's what our goal is. We did some research. The question came up, have we done this before and how many times? We've got 23 lots that we've done in the past. Earliest ones, 2004, 2005, and up to 2012, 2013. But we have 3 in the pipeline right now. But we essentially purchased the property with the federal and state grants. We demolished the houses, and essentially it becomes a green space not to be built on again. Here's Greenwood subdivision. We bought, let's see, 9 lots here. And if you go back and look, these were actually bought before the 2010 flood event. You can see it's even farther up into several of these other lots. But again, this is an older subdivision. The technology, the information was not as good as what we have today. And a lot of these houses were built in low areas, prone to flooding. And we're just asking for help to try to alleviate this problem.
3 are pending from...
Three are pending.
You budget. This is Craig Harris from our committee wanting to know, are those 3 in our budget? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No.
We approved them. I recall we approved 3 of them 3 years ago.
We approved the application, right?
The application, right.
We've approved the application,
Yes,
but we
sir.
haven't got the, if you...
Grant award.
Yeah, we haven't got the award. When the award comes, we don't budget until we
Then
have the
you
award.
have to
Then we
present
come
it.
to you, just like any
It could
time
be a
else.
no at
Right, it's
that
just like I
point.
said on
Could it be a
Tuesday
no?
night.
Could we say at that point,
So,
never mind?
yes.
This could take well over 18 months for the process just to get approved. So it's not a quick fix.
We've been sitting on those other 3 for Matthew Fazek.
2018, yes, sir.
18 months.
So it's like really no different. This is, I guess you're requesting permission to apply.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And so you're not on the hook for anything until the award comes, and then you either accept or don't accept the
But
award.
we're
And
committed
two-
to 300,000.
For all of them.
Right, and 2, understand that just because we apply doesn't mean that every homeowner will be approved by FEMA, because these homeowners are required to show a lot of documentation, bills that were incurred over repairs, costs for having to relocate during the flood, insurance costs, you name it, if they have insurance. Any bills that they have incurred, they have to show comprehensive documentation for them to even be approved for the grant, to make sure that they are legitimate repetitive losses.
Have y'all looked at that information? Do they have that information?
They're working on compiling all that at this point. The only thing they've done at this point is sign a letter of interest to participate in the grant, and we won't move forward with the rest of it until we're approved to move forward.
And remind me, because I know we've been through several of these, who will own the property?
The county.
Okay, and what is incidentals? What is that budgeted for?
That's appreciating the value appreciates over the lengthy time that it costs.
Well, how's it going to appreciate when it's $5?
Well,
it's like it depreciate.
Everything still appreciates approximately on 6%. I mean, I could be a little high on that, but there's mold remediate, not mold, lead paint. We've got to investigate that. Asbestos. We've got to pump the septic tanks out. So those are several things. Appraisals and whatnot, legal costs, advertising.
So the value. So the homeowner, like for example, on the first one, we would actually buy their house for $234,300.
Well, that's the estimate. The incidentals adds in the criteria for the time that it takes from the approval of the grant to the actual purchase, which may go up another 6% according to the assessor's analysis of what the value of the home may be at the time of the buyout. So that's what that allots for.
So we may not use all the incidents.
Yes, sir. Everyone, I've been told, of the 23 before, we've never used the entire amount that we've budgeted.
Okay, so who gets that money?
It goes back to, well, if...
We don't get it
get
unless we spend it.
Right.
We spend it
Right.
first,
Oh.
and then get
Ours
reimbursed.
12% would go down. It'd be 12% of a lesser number.
My one question, just from back when I was on planning, we had some flooding areas we were looking at, and there was talk of wells that they drill and basically put a casing on there and then using those to drain. Is that something y'all considered in your?
We are actually looking at that. We've got Dr. Albert Ogden looking at Shores Road area. We've had some flooding out there, obviously, from this spring. He is also, looking at how long the groundwater takes to drain down, but also drilling through from one aquifer to the other. But I'm still, the jury's still out for me on that because, a sinkhole, water goes in, but it can also come out. We don't know if there's extra capacity in that second aquifer that the hydrostatic pressure could pump water out. So
Well, I thought those things had check valves on them.
well, they could, yes, sir, right. But once you tap into it,
I understand. I understand there's a lot to look at there, and I'd say environmentally too, but I was just curious at what the cost on something like that might be.
Well, I haven't got a number on that, but we are, Dr. Ogden is looking at existing wells, existing sinkholes in the area, and we're going to use that information.
And can you report that back to Public Works?
Yes, sir.
As soon as we get that, it's something I'd really be interested in seeing.
Very intriguing.
I have some questions about this. Do you know how long the people have lived in these homes?
I do not have that in front of me. I know the guy the gentleman on Washington Boulevard has owned the house about 4 years. He was told that it's not in a FEMA flood zone, but was not
Well,
given.
who told him that?
The previous owner.
Well, see, when you buy a house, you get a property condition
Yes, sir.
disclosure.
Right.
So it seems like some of these people, if they're fairly recent, they need to go back on the person that
Yes, sir.
disclosed it to them.
That's in process.
And I opposed this last time. I really do feel for these people. I can't imagine what they're going through, but this is, 6 or 7 houses, and we've got 150,000 other parcels out there. This is a lot of money to buy something that is going to just be a grassy area that we can never use. And I understand we're helping them, but we're spending money that we don't have for something that we can't use and that we don't need.
Yes, sir.
I mean, this just isn't a logical business decision. So
We can use the area to over-excavate for a stormwater retention area. It won't, alleviate the drainage problem in the area, but it will help limit, the lower rainfall events and allow a place to collect. It can stay green grass. Like I said, the 23 parcels that we purchased before, essentially we mow them 2, 3, 4 times a year.
and so we've got liability too. If somebody goes out there and falls and gets hurt, now the county's got an insurance claim possibly. So it just doesn't make sense financially for me. I'm not seeing it.
But yes, sir. It's, like I said, we've investigated every alternative to help alleviate these drainage problems, and we cannot find a solution. This is the only thing that we have left to help these people.
On this vein of discomfort that Robert mentioned, that you for the last 2 times you presented these, you commented on the lack of technology and lack of planning from previous subdivisions. And then we were seeing stuff in 2014, no minimum floor elevation. Everybody out there knows what's going on. I'm a little uncomfortable with that too. So the motivation is, or the excuse rather, is they're old, and now we're getting them they're new.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that one as well. Why weren't there minimum floors on a 2014 house?
I wasn't here, so I don't know that answer. I assume that they looked at the FEMA flood zone, and it was not labeled correctly, so I can't answer that question. I wasn't employed.
So had you been in that chair, how could you have caught it?
I would.
I mean, would the person before you done anything different than what you did? I mean, would you have done anything different than what they did?
I look everything on a 30,000 foot level. I look farther out. I plan, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Murphy's Law, anything that can or will go wrong, I look at it. I look at if a house was built next to a road that potentially could become a dam, a culvert, we size them for a particular storm event. Culverts get clogged, they get crushed over time, they get overwhelmed by storm events. So I always require that houses are built up over spillover elevations. Anywhere that we're looking at a new house, new parcel. I've changed the way that we look at older lots. So if somebody were to come in from an older subdivision from the 70s, 80s, 90s, like that, we would reevaluate it, essentially look at the drainage for that particular lot. If somebody has not built on a lot, from the 50s or 80s, 90s or whatever, there's a reason for that. And I want to know, is it because of a local drainage condition like this? So we've made a new requirement that an engineer in our department looks at this before we issue a building permit. We have a zoning compliance form, and then an engineer looks at that before that zoning compliance form is issued. Sir?
Any size lot?
Any size lots, yes. An older subdivision, tract of land out in the county, 5 acres and above. A lot of times they're not in subdivisions, they're just parcels of land. And so if you were to come to me and say, hey, I'd like to build a house out here in the country, I'm going to say, okay, let me look at it first, and I'm going to look at the drainage. I use the wonderful technology we have now, topographic maps, flood maps. If we know information about the area, is it prone to flooding? A lot of these, we lucked out pictometry. They flew the county when we had the heavy rains from this spring, February, March. So that's a red flag a lot of times if you see that. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I do, I sleep. Don't get a lot of sleep sometimes.
I think that's what you were listening for, is what are we doing differently now to evaluate these lots? I think we're doing a lot of things.
2014 wasn't different.
Right.
That's there's like $800,000 worth of houses in Rockville slipped through the cracks.
So
usually, what I found in planning is, if you had somebody in that neighborhood that had lived there a number of years, they could tell you where the water flooded to. I had said, yeah, it was over those fence posts over there, and that's always threw a red flag up to me. But the question, and Commissioner Stevens, I think, has got a valid point. If you've got some of these houses here that were sold recently, and it was not disclosed to them from the previous owner that was flooding, there should be a liability issue.
Well, there is, and if it was disclosed and they continued forward and didn't pay attention to it, then...
Well, what my suggestion would be, Mike, is to take this list to our county attorney and let him look at that to see if there might be a liability issue that we could go back on this previous owner that's dumped this on somebody. If that's the case, now that may not be the case, I'm not saying anybody has it, but I'd like to see somebody look at that and let us know.
It's my understanding that particular homeowner has been talking about moving forward with litigation against the previous owner.
Well, in a case like that would save us from...
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate. If the house hadn't sold and it's still flooded, wouldn't we be buying it from that person?
Well, like I said, that depends on those issues too, and that occurred to me too, but still, you don't do that to people.
Right.
I mean, not the way I was raised.
But that just feels like a civil issue. That doesn't really feel like our issue.
My point, and Commissioner Stevens' point, I think it is a civil issue. But if there's any of those that, we think might fall in that criteria, I'd like to have their opinion on that.
Is there a statute of limitations on,
I'm
going
not
back
sure.
on an owner?
I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure if it's a contract. It might be a breach of contract, which might be 6 years. I'm not sure what the statute is, but when you go to law school property class, the very first thing you learn is this Latin phrase, caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. You've got to do your due diligence and look at everything top to bottom. And if, you get what you get.
Yes, sir.
And we're charged with making good decisions for all the constituents, and we can't make a bad decision to help somebody else out of a bad situation. If you want to help somebody, you can't make a bad decision to help somebody out of a bad situation. And I just feel like that's what we're going to be doing, is putting ourselves in a situation where we've got a liability forever that we can't really do anything with. So.
And I agree with what you're saying. However, Mike's got a valid point. Some of these houses that are dating back in the 50s, and we didn't have good information, and we would basically say, yeah, you can build over here. I think that we do have some liability in some of those cases, and some of these I think are valid. Some of the newer ones I question.
So some of the older maps that when I started as an engineer, all we had to work off of were the old USGS topo maps. And these are essentially 10-foot increments between here and here. So there's a lot of things that can happen in those 10-foot lines. And they, as technology has improved, hopefully our product and what we're given to the citizens of Rutherford County, the lots and the homes that they're being built are protected from flooding.
These homes that was done in the 50s and 60s, whatever, is it the original owner, or are they sold through years?
No, sir. No, sir. I would have to go back and look, and I think the one on Shadowbrook Drive in Smyrna, he's been there a dozen years. Washington was 4 years. I'm not sure about some of the dates on these.
I guess this is my issue, because I want to help if we can, but I'm just going to grab some numbers out of the air, okay?
Yes, sir.
So if someone buys a house for $100,000, and then 12 years later, here, it's there, now it's 180. Why will we help them out, but let them profit $80,000?
Well,
I guess that's my...
You still have to give them fair market value.
Yes, sir.
That's a requirement.
To get the grant, that's a
Yes, sir.
requirement.
Yes, sir.
It's based on market value, or the appraised value.
Yes, the appraised value.
Well, what FEMA is trying to do is have the properties that are causing claims for them be pushed off onto somebody else. If this was a good deal, they would buy the properties. No. But
Well,
they're trying to
it's not
entice us.
necessarily claims against FEMA, because none of these people have flood protection insurance. And they do have that. That's one thing that homeowners in this county are not really aware of, is that you don't even have to be in a flood zone to purchase flood insurance. As a matter of fact, it's cheaper for you if you are not in a flood zone and you purchase flood insurance. And so it's an option for everybody, regardless. I don't think it's something that FEMA's having to worry about pushing back on the public to save funding. I think the only place they're saving funding from what we've been seeing is stopping their studies.
Well, there's a reason why they're not wanting to own it. They don't want the liability to maintain it and keep it. So they're dangling in front of us, and they want us to own it, and maintain it, and keep it. So.
Okay, we've really run this one through the ringer pretty well. Do I hear any kind of recommendation from our committee or further discussion?
To me, it's one of those things that it feels like an obligation for the health and welfare of the citizens. I mean, it's not a healthy environment to have these homes continue. I mean, what's the plan B? Let them continue to sit there and flood, and then people leave them and they're condemned, and I mean, what's the plan? The smart thing to do is clean it up, get them out of it, let's get out of the situation. Because I could easily see a homeowner saying, well, the county should have never issued a building permit. So is there some culpability there? We've had rain events, in the last dozen years we've never seen before, so who could have predicted a lot of this? But I just always begin with the end in mind, and the end of either decision is the house is either going to fall down on itself and we're going to go in and clean it up, or we're just going to take care of it now. So I make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion, and I have a question.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
This is basically
To apply.
to apply.
Permission to apply,
We're not obligating any money whatsoever.
Not at this juncture.
Okay, I remember my question. So, are these floodings consistent, or is it just on major floods?
It's repetitive loss based on, like I said before, how much rain we're getting in a specific area. So if it just happens to, a measurable amount of rainfall comes through or stalls over that general area, the water's going to come up guaranteed.
But these homes have flooded multiple times.
Yes, sir.
Even the one that's 50 years old, did it flood back when it was new?
That's what we've been told, but again, the homeowner is responsible for showing documentation and proof of these repetitive losses. So that's in the form of photographic evidence, bills that were incurred, and any costs associated with those events.
We had a question on the Public Works the other night from Mr. Harris. How would this be funded if and when we do this? The money will come from
The general fund.
general fund. There's
You'll
Mr.
have to
Harris's
appropriate it.
answer.
It could be the next budget year we decide to appropriate or not, or find out
Well, I mean, you're not
where
going
we're
to
gonna pull it from. or
you're not
what.
going to make that decision until you know you got the
Yeah.
award.
Yeah, sure, of course. That's,
And at that point, that's when.
There's nothing said in concrete that all of them be approved.
No, and there's nothing set in concrete that the homeowners will move forward either. They have the option to back out.
the next year, all 20 of them could have said yes. Only 7?
Well, no, the limit is, we need to get paperwork in by no later than, they want it by December, they'll give us till April. So if the further homeowners aren't involved in this, they have the option to apply when another grant round becomes available.
But when you advertised the grant round, you submitted that to 20 cases that had this recurring flood problem. All 20 could have said yes, only 7 did.
Right.
So one year it could be 20. And then, really, so you good with that, Rhonda? I mean, if it escalates, maintain this precedent?
We'll just cross that bridge when we get to it.
I'd say one thing we're going to hear if we do this is you're going to have people that had property flood that's never said anything, and then they're going to come to every commissioner most likely and tell you this: you spent my tax dollars helping them, why didn't you help me? So it's not a good answer for that.
Well, the answer would be, you didn't come to tell me.
Yeah, did you come to
You
engineering?
didn't apply for the grant.
They might not have knew that.
True.
Well, now they did.
Lot of these.
Which also means we didn't know about their flood. So
Right. These were all from people who reached out to us, asked for help, and that's what we've looked at it forwards, backwards, north, south, east, and west, and could not find a way to help them out. So this is the only option we have.
Okay, are any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
No.
Commissioner Allen?
yes.
Commissioner Peete?
Yes. Okay, this passes, and what that basically means is, if you get the grant, come back to us, and then we'll talk again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks much. Thanks.
Okay, next on the agenda is the general fund budget amendment and transfer calls. I see Mr. Gregory first.
Now, why do y'all let him go first?
Have any idea?
Yeah, 4:45. I only can remember about 5 years ago we got to
5 years ago.
Good evening. I've got a couple of budget amendments. The first one you've seen before, it's moving additional money out of our full-time veterinary line over to our vet services line to pay for our contract veterinarians. And the second portion is to recognize revenue from the State of Tennessee Animal Friendly Grant in the amount of $1,550 and put that into drugs and medical supplies. That's for the spay and neuter surgeries for low-income residents.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Piercy?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. P?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, you've got another one there.
Yes, sir. The other is asking for your approval to apply for a grant. We had to apply for it previously. The mayor had given me approval to go ahead and do that before I went out on medical leave. But we applied for $62,200. It's just getting everything in order, so if we do receive it, we can go ahead and sign and appropriate the money at that time. The money is from Petco, and it will be used for adoption promotions and adoption prep towards animals with heartworms, heartworm preventative, and microchips. There is no county match, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. I saw this in public safety, so I'm good. But any other discussions? Hearing none, call roll.
Mr. Dodd? Yes. Mr. Gooch? Mr. Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Mr. P?
Yes, motion carries.
Y'all just remember, I was
Thank you,
done in
Mr.
30
Perry.
seconds next time.
Okay, now we have a drug fund budget amendment from the Sheriff's Department. Welcome.
Good evening. In regard to this one, and Lisa's going to address some of the other things in a second. This one is a request to move $20,000 from the Restricted Public Safety Fund, 122-34525, and move that into 122-54150-338, which is maintenance repair of vehicles for those vehicles with that division. And year to date, they've used quite a bit for repair of vehicles, and just to appropriate that money into the other fund. So.
I saw this in public safety, and I was pretty pleased to see it because I don't remember that drug fund money being used to do maintenance before. I thought it was a good thing myself.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion, second. Commissioner Dodd. Any other questions? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Next is a special purpose fund budget amendment.
In October, they received $2,700 from the asset forfeiture funds and is requesting to appropriate to the confidential funds, $2,700.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other questions for Lisa on this one? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen? Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, you've got another one here, I believe, Lisa. or-
Yes, and there's 4 different amendments. Talking broadly, you've already approved the acceptance of the grants. This is now putting the monies into the budget. The first one is for the 2019 Tennessee Highway Safety Office grant for the alcohol enforcement. It's for overtime and benefits for the fiscal year ending 9/30/19. Revenue of $24,430, overtime and benefits. That's the first one. The second, if you don't, I'm going to go, unless y'all stop me. Okay, the second one is for $60,000, and it's for, again, the Tennessee Highway Safety Office for fiscal year 2020, overtime and benefits. Number 3, again, this one is the Tennessee, again, Highway Safety Grant, Tennessee Drivers Safety for overtime benefits and for a conference, revenue of $18,000 overtime and for that training. And then the last one is for, it's a liaison coordinator, network coordinator, and it is for overtime benefits, 3 laser devices for speed enforcement, and 3 conferences for the fiscal year ending 9/30/2020. A revenue of $20,000 and $1.
Okay, do I hear any questions? be open for a motion. Mr. Johnson,
Second.
Mr. Allen. Any further questions? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pete?
Yes, motion carries. Next is the Tennessee Division of Election Grants for Election Commission and related general fund budget amendments. And I think Lisa's got this one.
It's acceptance of a grant of $1,837, and it is to buy computers and equipment, and its money is coming from Help America Vote Act, $1,837.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Pete?
Yes, and motion carries. And next, we have a sub-award grant agreement with Volunteer Behavioral Health Care System.
Okay, so 18, 19, and 20 on your iPad all have to do with a grant that was awarded to the Correctional Work Center. The whole project is to keep families together while in the incarceration. It was awarded. This is now the sub-award grants with Volunteer Behavioral. They will be providing counseling, group and individual, and therapy if needed. The sub-award grant agreement to the Family Center, they will have classes and they will be nurturing that parent and child time together and reconnect those relationships as these, getting ready to go out. And then as a part of that grant, there's a requirement for the program to be evaluated, and that's where MTSU comes in, that they will, their part is to evaluate the whole program.
All three of these combined, correct?
Well, the whole program,
All three of these are,
and all of it is related to the one grant. It's just the different parts, pieces and parts of it, and MTSU will evaluate.
we can put all three of these in one.
Yes, I will take your motion for all three.
Second.
Do we have any financial commitment to this?
No, I think it was 100%. You already did that. I think, did we admit that?
Is this something that we have to continue after the rent expires?
I think it's a 3-year.
It's a 3-year grant.
3-year
I
grant.
saw that, I mean, after 3 years is over,
I
you
think you'll
locked in to
decide.
keep it.
No, I don't think
Not
so.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Don't have to.
Reapply. It's not continuous.
I don't think you're bound
You're not.
past the 3 years.
No, you wouldn't be.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pete?
Yes, motion carries. Next is a memorandum of understanding with the Guidance Center for Juvenile Detention, and I think Lisa you'll be picking that up too. I don't see,
I will.
well, I don't see Lynn here,
So,
but she comes in the next moment or two.
okay, so I read through this, what was presented, and apparently that it has to do, well, you can read it, that the JDC will develop the referral systems for services, and they will support the services to allow access to offenders and parents when needed, include court liaisons when needed as appropriate, compensate the Guidance Care Center for care not covered by another payer source. You've got the listing of what the Guidance Center will do, and both parties agree that they're going to do the best practices to benefit the recipient. On the second page are the rates. Volunteer will bill Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center for the services for indigent juveniles in a statement format applicable to both parties within 15 days of the month. Then, we'll pay it within 15 days of receipt of the invoice.
Is this in her budget?
That I don't know. That I
I don't know if it is. I know some of this gets paid by insurance too, or another form of payment. I think it's stated in here too, I believe.
I'm wanting to say that it is. We saw this in public safety, and we did pass it. And to me, it was an update of the contract that we've
That
had
we already
existing
had.
for a number of years. And it's like I said, a memorandum of understanding, basically an update for something that's been ongoing. So I'm going to assume that money has already been allocated.
But that's something that we provide anyway, that the counseling that's indigent.
Yeah.
Is that?
I agree with you.
And it's just the guidance center that's going to.
And like I said, I don't know the complete contract, which of course I wish Lynn was here, she can answer that for you. But if we have any questions for it, we can definitely ask the full commission if this does move forward. Or if not, we can wait on it.
And it looks like we're only bound for 90 days anyway.
I wish I could be a little more explicit there, but it was to the will of the committee. We can put this off a month if you prefer.
Or I can have that,
Or you
if the
can have that
question
at the
is
full
whether or
commission.
not there's funding for it, we can get that for you
I think
between now and next week.
Address it now, contingent upon that.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve contingent upon the information being provided at the full commission. Second by Commissioner Dodd. Any further questions? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd? Yes. Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes, motion carries. I want to go ahead and skip down and catch the other business.
Well, I'm going to ask you
Is
a
that-
question. I'm going
okay.
to ask you, because if we're taking care of this for the rest of the night, do you want to jump and go ahead and do 24?
That's what I was just saying, yeah, I wanted to jump down to that, so please, continue.
No, I mean, if you want to go ahead and hear them, and we can jump back and do the rest of it. If you want to go ahead and
Why
get
don't we do that, and that way
IDB,
let these guys get out of
that.
here, so, okay. Gentlemen? Let's see.
We're having such fun. We don't.
Okay, this is a contribution agreement with the Industrial Development Board of Rutherford County. Mr. Reed?
Yeah, committee members, appreciate you hearing us tonight. This, if many of you will remember, there was a pilot project that the Airport Authority did on some undeveloped property it had on its property for decades. They had been trying to solicit for industrial development, and that was a Hillwood project that was approved by the County Commission back in 2015. It went through the IDB then. It also went to the State Comptroller's Office. And it was kind of a routine type pilot project that was issued. The project was built out. They built 3 large buildings out there on the Airport Authority property. Their value of those buildings are $82 million. Along with those improvements, they installed a lot of infrastructure for public streets, sewer, and water, and other utilities that benefit the airport. And basically extended these infrastructure towards the long-term plans that the airport has to have passenger terminal service there at the airport. So that's part of the Hillwood project. It also, under the Hillwood agreement, they're paying leasehold payments to the Airport Authority, and I think $160,000 this past year. That goes up over future years as these additional buildings have come online. There's been an issue that has emerged with respect to the pilot, in that the assessor's office has levied an assessment against that project, which was not contemplated by the pilot and not expected. It was not anything normal that you see in pilot arrangements. So to kind of correct that issue, what the tax authorities are recommending is that we do a contribution agreement, which is what you have before you tonight, which is an agreement that basically says the assessor's office can go ahead and assess whatever taxes the assessor's office believes they are obligated to assess in regards to the project. Those taxes will then be collected by the county, but the county would then go ahead and remit those back to IDB to be administered under the pilot program as was intended with respect to the original pilot. So it's kind of a circular type thing, but allows the assessor's office to go ahead and assess the taxes which the assessor believes he has an obligation to assess. And those monies get routed to the county, back to IDB, to be administered through the pilot by the IDB as was originally intended. So that's the purpose of this contribution agreement. The way this contribution agreement is written, it does not pertain to just the Hillwood project. It pertains to any other pilot project that this may come up on. So should this come up on any other pilot project we have, this will do the same thing. It will route those monies back to the IDB to be funded back to the pilot under the terms of the pilot as was originally agreed.
Not just the pilot at the airport, a pilot anywhere in the county.
Any pilot. So this takes care of the Hillwood issue, but also should this arise with any other pilots in the county, this takes care of that issue as well. This has been approved by the Industrial Development Board already. It was approved by steering on Monday night, and so that's where it's gone so far. So that's not it's coming before you. And having said that, we have John Black with the airport with us tonight, and we have Summer Bowden with the Industrial Development Board who can answer any questions you have. And John may want to give a little bit of history about this, just to remind the committee members kind of the history about the airport, who comprises the airport authority, and just to remind ourselves that really the airport authority is really partly Rutherford County. It's 60% Rutherford County, 40% Smyrna. So, and it's one thing you may not hear every day, but it really is the large part of it is a county entity. So with that, John.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And to us, this is really bigger than Hillwood because, for one thing, the airport is part of that toolbox that we all use when we're out recruiting business to Rutherford County. And the checklist comes out, and do you have an airport? Yes. And does it have certain capacity and so forth? And we stay on the list a lot of times for companies. A great example of that is Nissan. Nissan wouldn't be there if the airport wasn't there. That was one of their criteria for coming to Rutherford County. So, and as Jeff mentioned, it's a 60-40 split. So really, the county owns the airport, and Smyrna owns the airport under a joint agreement that was done back in 1991. To go back a little further, when the base was closed in 1971, and many of you know this, but it was transferred over to the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. They had it for almost 20 years until there was a point in time when they were kind of doing their own thing with the American Airlines hub there in Nashville. They weren't really paying much attention to Smyrna Airport. And thank goodness, a group of people here in Rutherford County, in this building, the chamber, our legislators, created the airport authority, and we got the airport. It's a pretty good deal. We got it for $1. But since that time, we have invested $125 million in the airport. Jeff mentioned Hillwood alone has put $82 million into this project. I mean, it is literally a game changer for us, for the county, for Smyrna. It puts us on much more stable financial footing so that we're not up here asking for any money. And we pride ourselves on that. We don't want to be here asking for money. The airport, we want it to be self-sufficient. It is self-sufficient. It's growing now more than it ever has. Last year we grew 25% versus the year before in aircraft operations. About any day you come out there, all these name brand companies that we all know and reside in our county, General Mills, Kroger, State Farm, Nissan, there's a lot of airplanes out there serving all those companies that are here in Rutherford County. So it's important to us that we honor, what the intent was 2.5 years ago under this arrangement. And it's important to the airport, it's important to Hillwood. I think it's important to Rutherford County as a whole to send the right message that that's what we're going to do for companies that come to us, and we want them here, is to honor what we've told them.
Mr. Black, thank you so much for coming. And two,
Yes.
I want to say it's definitely an asset. Mayor?
It was my understanding, gentlemen, that the comptroller on the pilot had originally okayed this pilot ride by the prior commission. So when I took office last year, this was one of the, I think, Mayor Burgess said it was one of the loose ends left on his desk that need to be taken care of. So we've actually been working on this, been working with you all since last September, trying to bring some resolve. It didn't make sense in talking to the IDB, Smyrna Airport Authority, and with our property assessor. The property assessor kind of dug his heels in, but this deal that is now before you is a win-win. what was going to happen. It was getting closer and closer because Rob had hired Bobby Lee, who used to work for the comptroller's office, who represents all the assessors across the state. They were prepared to sue, and we were going to go to court. But we were end up suing ourselves because he was using our tax dollars. Also, we'd be using tax dollars for the Smyrna Airport Authority, and we sue ourselves. That just didn't make sense. So I'm glad to see this resolved. The other night, the steering is pushing it on. So it's my recommendation that this is a good deal for Rutherford County.
Well, just remind me what the pilot project was on this case.
That was done 2.5 years ago.
It was. It essentially, it gave a tax break to Hillwood to build not only some speculative buildings on a portion of the airport authority property that couldn't be used for aviation. And in addition to the actual buildings, there was a substantial infrastructure investment, not only that allowed those 3 and now perhaps 4 buildings to be built, but it in turn opened up the development of a lot of the rest of the portion of the property. So I'm afraid I can't give you a dollar amount as I sit here today, but that was the sum and substance of it, Commissioner.
Can I add one thing? I had the same confusion you did, Trey, because typically when we hear pilot, you think experimental. It's an experimental thing that we're going to try here and try it somewhere else. This is an acronym,
Yeah.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what the pilot is, payment in lieu of taxes. It's not what we would typically think of as a pilot project.
Well, so and we've approved that.
Yes, sir.
So how?
Prior commission. Prior commission approved.
Okay, so why, I guess my confusion is why is the property assessor assessing it for taxes if we had to?
It's my understanding in long discussions with him, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but he thought that he would call the FFA in Washington and get information, and I'm not sure that translation was exactly correct. But he said that the buildings that had to be built had to be aviation related, producing whatever or storing whatever in those buildings. Am I correct?
Well, yes, and there is a process that you go through to to have non-aviation development on an airport. There's another example on the airport. The golf course and the park are owned by the airport. Those are non-aviation. But in this case, and you were talking about topography earlier. Well, we're back to that subject here because at the airport, that land was essentially a big hill. And to make it aviation usable, which a taxiway, a runway can only have a 2% slope. Airplanes don't like, slopes. We would literally have to take the side of the mountain out. It was just unfeasible. So that's when we looked at non-aviation uses. We went to the FAA. We got the release from the FAA to do non-aviation development back in 2012. We have a letter from them approving that. So we did all that because we knew we had to do that. And the other test that we had to make, because this was a long-term solution, a long-term lease, was in 1971, the county commission passed a resolution that created this formula for non-aviation uses. And we wanted to make sure that formula was going to kind of hold water for a long time because Hillwood was a long-term deal. So we went to Mr. Mitchell. We met with him. He researched it for us, and he came back and said, that is no longer legal or valid. It had been done, 30 years ago. So we said, okay, appreciate that. Letting us know. Well, that's when we took the route of going through the pilot application, in which we, as you know, we got that approved through all the parties. So we went through a very deliberate, well-planned, thought-out process. It was on top of the table, and everyone was on board with it.
And what are in the buildings?
So one of the buildings is Lowe's Home Improvement. It's large appliances. Another one is Frankie. Frankie is and they're actually located off of our property, but they wanted to expand, so they've now expanded over onto the airport property. So we're growing local business, we're bringing in new business. The third building, they're working on a lease for that one. They have, I think they estimated by the middle of 2020, about 400 jobs.
What is Estes on there?
I'm sorry.
Is Estes on there?
Cappuccino.
No, they're just across. Yeah, they do, right. And restaurant equipment and research and development.
Well, I'll move that we approve the request.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'd like to make a comment or two, or I have a couple of questions. We're talking with Lisa this afternoon, we were going over this, and I talked to Jeff a little bit on this too. One thing that I've got a question about, and that's on this pilot, especially with you saying this would make a difference on the other pilots. Right now, on these pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, and just so everybody knows, we're not out here doling out money just because they have to meet a strict criteria of a 3-to-1 minimum payback. So if we give them $1, they got to give us $3 back for every dollar we give them. So this is a money-making process for the county. But there may be a problem, and maybe you can tell me this and basically address more to Jeff and the county attorney, is are these actually going to be put on the tax roll since we're assessing this tax? If they're put on the tax roll, then we have to share those monies.
I think they're working through the language.
Well, the assessor's office has put, under a pilot, they should not be on the tax rolls.
Right.
Well,
They're not.
right, that's
Yeah.
what's bothering me.
So that's the issue that has kind of arisen in regards to it. But but the assessor's office has taxed these properties irrespective of the pilot being approved, which is different than normally what happens. So what we're looking to do is put some language in I've talked to Ms. Nellen, so we'll try to add language that works for her office into the contribution agreement before it comes with full commission, that will make sure that these monies that are paid into the county are not subject to the sharing arrangements and the other allocations you have to do from a budgetary standpoint that are otherwise applicable to monies when they come into the county. So I've talked to, we have Bradley Arendt, which is a law firm in Nashville, who's one of some of the top tax experts in the state, and also Bassberry out of Knoxville, who are the top pilot attorneys in the state, are looking to get language together that we'll put into this agreement that will cover that issue. So we will cover that issue so that the monies will not be subject to sharing and not be subject to division, but when they come to the county, they can be remitted back directly to the IDB.
But that language will also cover the other pilots that we have, is that correct?
It will cover all pilots.
Okay, I see Mayor nodding back there.
Yes.
Well, that was my main concern on this. I think you guys are doing a wonderful job out there.
Yeah.
It makes me happy every time I drive past there. But
All the other pilots that we handle, they're, as you said, they're not on the tax roll because they're exempt. So all of those billings come through our office, and then payments are made directly to finance and not the trustee.
So they'll pay the tax, and then we reimburse it.
100%?
Yes, sir.
And then y'all, but then we will still get the payments in lieu.
Correct. You still get the payments in lieu of taxation.
Yes. For all the acronyms that we've been throwing around, what you're being asked to approve today is exactly what was already approved. It's just a more circular way to get at it.
A lot more steps, but it's just a circle
exactly
right. right back to where it started.
Exactly right.
The circle of life.
That's something like that.
Don't sing that song.
Okay, we have
That's the only one
we got a motion and we have a second. Is there any other discussion?
I just can't let this moment pass without saying I'm frustrated and annoyed that our property assessor would take a protocol that has been approved all the way up to the comptroller's office, makes us very strong economically, being able to work through our IDB. We've already lost 2 opportunities out there, I believe. The Chamber of Commerce had said, who's going to want to do business in Rutherford County if we can't honor our word? And so we absolutely should vote for this, but I just couldn't let the moment go by without saying, we don't have to be here. We didn't have to spend all the time and money and energy and effort to get here. We should have been a team. And the rest of the team was on board, and I'm highly annoyed with our assessor that he was not.
Noted.
Did we find out how much he spent on attorney fees the other night? I was not sure.
Yeah, well, I've got two things. One, hold on. In last year, there was one payment made of $1,796 that was pretty much specific to the airport issue. Then there was another payment made in March of 19 for $15,000, but it was more or less a retainer to the same firm. So I'm not, it doesn't say anything specific to the airport, it's just legal service retainer.
Does he retain, is that every year has he retained somebody for 15,000? Or is this the first time he's retained somebody for that?
I don't recall him.
The steering the other night, he said he spent less than 5,000 on steering, if you remember that.
Well, sounds like that's not accurate. If he's paid $15,000 for a retainer.
He was saying to this attorney that was sitting right beside him for this event. That's all he said publicly.
Unless this 15 is for other purposes.
I'm off my soapbox, I'm done. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, any more airing we need to do? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Peake?
Yes, and the motion carries. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you for
patience.
staying so
We were
late.
trying to get there.
Took a while to get there.
Thank you very
That's
much.
interesting.
We definitely needed the dog pound to go before.
Come back anytime.
Okay, we're back to, we just finished up number 21, memorandum
Right.
of understanding, and then you want to go ahead and pick up this 21K that we talked about, or,
You want to go to 22?
that's fine.
Yeah, we'll just, then add that one at the end since.
All right.
Okay, so this next 122 is the contract with Smith County for juvenile detention. It looks like a very similar contract that she has with other counties to hold their juveniles.
Right. We saw this in public safety, and it's basically, they've got a new county mayor, and he wanted to update some of the contracts. This was an old contract we've had for a number of years, and it's basically an update the way I understood it.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
In a second, Commissioner Dodd.
Do you know how many contracts we had like that?
I asked her, and I wanted to say.
Oh, it's juvenile, you don't
With
know.
other counties,
I wanted to say
what they have. No, sir.
it was in excess of 30, maybe more than that. Gosh, I forgot, and I specifically asked that myself, but satisfied and promptly forgot. It's between 70 and 30. And I asked her too if we had any drop off, and we haven't that I'm aware of. And we kicked some off, well, actually the state withdrew some of theirs for a while because we were aggravated at them not
Because
paying
they
us.
weren't paying.
They weren't paying in a timely manner, like 6 to 8 months in arrears or more. And so they got mad because we pushed them and they stopped sending us people for a while, but we've kissed and made up since then. But somewhere between 30 and 70. I'll get that information back to y'all.
But when it comes right down to it, we're doing it at a loss anyway, are we not?
Well,
We were when I sat on public safety.
here's the deal, and the same thing with the sheriff's department. We've got X number of employees, kind of like Mr. Mitchell was saying. We've got fixed costs and employees there. We've got open jail cells. And if we take these people in, we're actually getting some revenues we would not have that's going to help offset those costs. And that doesn't pay for all of it, but those inmates actually help offset fixed costs. So that's the plus of it. And we can also, if we're tight on space, we can refuse anybody, we can send anybody back. If there's a high-profile individual, we don't want them, we don't have to take them. I mean, that's all part of our contracts.
It's just a renewal anyway, isn't it?
This is a renewal.
Have we ever done a study to see if it would be cheaper just to do our residents only and downsize the staff versus having the bigger staff and having the out-of-county people come in?
Robert, I don't think so. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't think so. Let's see, do we have a motion on this? We do, a motion and a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Dodd? Yes. Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, next is general fund budget amendment for the drug court.
Okay, so in this case, we were trying to get ahead of the game and try to estimate what the leftover grants would be into the following year for the VTC2 grant, Veterans Treatment Court. So this amendment is strictly a cleanup amendment to get the money, revenue right, and all the expenses in the right areas.
No new money.
It's not new money. It's really just, it's reducing the amount that we had estimated by almost $10,000 and then just shifting off money.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Johnson.
Second that.
Commissioner Dodd, second. Any other questions for Lisa? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
we
Let's
have to
down to the other business.
Yes, and the other business was at your desk, at your place. So the juvenile detention center is being asked by Randy Mantooth, one of our county attorneys, to provide some computer information in response to the litigation that's currently cannot be extracted readily from our, as she said, our 16-year-old computer system. As such, the company will have to have a special project team to create a new program to do this, and there are not sufficient funds in the line item to pay this. The information needs to get to the attorneys or to the attorneys to the courts by the end of December. So that's why they are asking for additional funds to be able to
Who's going to do
provide
it?
this information. The people who have the software, that whoever has the software that's in there, the owners of the software, they're programmers. They can pull it out, as I understand it, talking with Brad, they can pull the information out, but it's common delimited, it's not easily readable, and it has to be, as I understand it. And so that's why the reason for these additional funds to accomplish this.
Is the estimate a reasonable estimate? Is it going to go up or down? Is it just like an educated guess, I guess? Or is it a contract?
She asked, it's between 20 and 21,000 is what she's estimating.
Have we seen a contract?
I have not.
I always think about performance measures, if they don't perform, then what, that's always my thing.
If they don't have it by December when the judge says we
Right.
need it.
Well, they've probably got a deadline on when things have to be done, and we don't want to be held in contempt for not answering our interrogatories or providing the request for production of documents. So, but I do agree that we might want to make part of our motion that they have to sign a contract with us that outlines what they're supposed to do and when they have to do it, and they might have one. We
They may
not
have
have
one.
seen it yet, but.
Well, that would show us having good faith anyway. So, having said that, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve subject to performance.
To review the contract?
Well, with performance measurements in there.
Okay.
To meet the goal.
Performance measurements to meet the goal.
So we have a motion, Commissioner Allen. Second. Commissioner Johnson. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. I believe that's got us wrapped up, guys. Let's go home.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Yeah.